Hi, welcome. My name is Panashe Ndolvu, and I'm your instructor for the Personality Development and Leadership course. Today, we're going to be looking at our final module for this course. We're going to be looking at personal branding and brand management. Excited? How are you feeling about it? Right. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling excited about it, right? So, um, question. What would I find if I were to Google you? If you haven't tried this before, I think you might want to and find out what results you get when you Google yourself. Yeah, you can try it even now. Yeah, um, click on the next step. Yeah, and Google your name. What do you find? Do you like um, what you are seeing? Hmm. Think about it. And we're going to come back to this as we navigate today's today's module, right? So, in our previous module, we talked about personal branding. We talked about building a brand identity. What goes into personal branding? That is more than what people are going to see. That is more than the online presence that you have. What goes into personal branding, right? And we talked about um, the importance of understanding the self, understanding yourself, understanding your values, understanding your qualities, understanding your interests, the things that make you you, the things that make you unique, and leveraging on that to build the brand identity that you would like to build for yourself. You are on track. You are on track and you are doing a great job. Um, the way in which we structured this course was so that you can start to think about yourself before you put yourself out there, right? You understand, first of all, the inner you. After understanding the inner you, you can then now navigate um, the brand that you'd like to build, what you would like to be known for, right? So, with that in mind, we're going to way right into our structure for today. What are we looking at? Have a mini introduction as we have had already, right? And I hope that you're still thinking about it, right? What you look at yourself already? What results have you found? Um, you might have probably come across your link profile or a link to one of your social media profiles, right? You are. In the self, we're going to look at purposeful communication, right? We're going to look at brands that are engaging, brands that make an impact. And we're going to get you started. We're going to look at online branding essentials. Then, before um, we close the program, um, we're going to have a mini soft skills workshop to get you started. And finally, we're going to have final reflections on the personality development and leadership course. Yeah? Great. Now, in our previous module, we talked about personal development planning, right? And your personal brand. is one of the things that will have to feature in your personal development plan, right? Let's look at this way. Your personal brand is living, all right? And if you decide to say that today I'm going to create a LinkedIn profile, if you haven't created one already, or if you decide to say that today I'd like to revise and refine my LinkedIn profile, right? That's not going to be the end of it. That's not going to be the end of it. If you say that you'd like to optimize even your social media handles, right? That's not going to be the end of it. If you write a personal brand statement, or if you decide to create a website for yourself, that's not going to be the end of it. Your personal brand is constantly evolving as you're growing, as you're getting to know yourself better, and as you're learning new things about yourself and your interests, as your interests are changing, as your goals are changing over time, as you continue growing and discover things that make you happy and things that give you contentment. That's the goal. That is the goal, right? So think about it. Um, think about it for a while as we move on, yeah? So articulating, first of all, you need to learn to articulate yourself. How do you articulate your skills? And in previous modules, this was our focus. In the module, the self-awareness module, wherein we wrote autobiographies, we wrote personal statements, and we did many activities throughout that module. This was to help you, first of all, express your feelings, because you can't articulate your skills, you can't articulate the things that you're good at if you don't know how to express your feelings, if you can't identify your feelings. Because if you can't identify your feelings, if you can't express your feelings, you are going to live in a state of denial, a state of self denial. In that case, right, articulating your skills is something that is going to be a rare possibility. It's something that's not going to happen. It's something that's not going to happen. So you need to learn, first of all, attune to your own feelings, attune to your own thoughts. What are the things that you think about? Right? One of the interesting things that I've learned, do you know that you're usually thinking about complex things when you're doing something else? Maybe um, you are out, you're taking a walk, you're doing something else, right? Something else that is not really important. That is usually when the brain is at its peak, right? This is when you're connecting disparate, things, disparate ideas. Your brain is very active at that time. So, what are the things that you think about in that time? So, one of the things that I would like to recommend you going forward, after this program, after today, after you listen, after listening to this recording, right? Start to journal. Start to write down the things that you think about when you're doing something else. Write those thoughts down. Don't neglect your thoughts. Don't neglect yourself. Don't neglect the things that define you. You are not defined by society. You're not defined by societal standards. You get to define who you are and who you want to be. Your ideal self doesn't come from other people. It doesn't come from society. It comes from within. You should dream of an ideal self and make a decision. Make a decision to attune to that ideal self. Right. And why are we talking about all of this? Your personal brand is one of the things that's a core and critical part of the ideal self. So think about it. What personal brand would I like to build? And personal branding is not for social, social entrepreneurs. It's not for community leaders. It's not for people who want to go into leadership, but doesn't matter what industry you are in. Even if you are, in the science industry, even if you are in the tech industry, you have got to be known for something. You've got to be the go-to person for something, right? So personal branding is critical. This is one of the things that I would like for us to talk about. Personal branding is critical, irregardless of the industry that you'd like to venture in. Okay? So let's talk about articulating your personal brand, right? But before we do that, remember we've been talking about the ideal self. The ideal self doesn't happen um doesn't come only through dreaming or thinking about it. Thinking about the ideal self that you'd like to be doesn't guarantee or bring about that ideal self. That ideal self comes through action. Okay. So the first thing that you need to do, you need to think about your ideal self and you write that down. As you write that down, you are promising yourself, you are making a commitment to yourself about that, right? So your ideal self, as I've said, writing that down. And this comes now. The next thing that would now come is making a plan for that ideal self. And it doesn't have to be a formal concrete plan. But then, by writing your thoughts as they come, and it doesn't have to be organized, it doesn't have to be arranged. To say, oh, my thoughts are now arranged and I'm literally writing in order. I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E. No, it doesn't work that way. Thinking is a process, writing is a process, and this is why I'm encouraging you to write, because writing is a process. It's going to help you think, right? And also, video journaling, one of the things that we talked about in the previous module, right? That's one of the things that could really be helpful. So in order for you to get to the ideal self that you hope to be, you first of all need to define your vision. What is your personal vision? You need to be able to define that. You need to be able to define this ideal self. And it doesn't have to apply to your career, the ideal career, the ideal self, yourself, your you in the next 10 years, the future you in terms of, the career or the job or the things that you're working on or the work that you're doing. Doesn't necessarily have to apply to one specific area of your life, right? But it should generally speak even to other areas of your life. Things like your relationship, you know, and things like that. So it's very important for you to define the ideal self that you hope to be. So the first step is defining your vision. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? So you need to make your vision as detailed as possible across all spheres of life, right? So you need to ask yourself this question: would I like to achieve? What is my vision, right? And I know if this question is sounding confusing, you know, or too concrete for you, that's totally fine, right? We're going to walk you through it and we're going to cover it in the next few topics. But for now, I'd like for you to think about your future self. What would you like to achieve, right? When you think of your future self, what is that future self doing? What is that future self working on, right? And as a result of all of this, what is that future self known for? This is the personal branding aspect. What is that future self known for? One thing that I would like for you to remember when defining your vision: future, the word future, from the word future, one of the things that we can understand is that future doesn't refer to the next 10 years only, doesn't refer to the next 5 years only, doesn't refer to the next year only. But the next minute is a future. It's the future. It's the future, yeah? Because it's not the present. The next hour is the future. The next 10 minutes are the future. So, how do we define the future? We define the future from this point that we are at moving forward. So, when you're thinking of your vision, don't just think about your future self in terms of years, but think about what you're going to be doing in the next 5 years to achieve the goals that you have. So, you also need to define your goals. What goals do you have? What are some of the goals that you have for yourself? Is it personal growth? Is it professional growth? What are you going to be doing in the 5 minutes that's going to push you, that's going to draw you closer to those goals. And now, when we talk about the actions that you need to do in order to reach your goals, those actions don't necessarily have to be big and solid, right? Remember, we say that your personal brand is living. So you can't, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to do everything in one moment and achieve that goal at once. No, every action counts. Each and every small action counts. So don't discredit the small efforts that you're going to make in the next minute or in the next 5 minutes or in the next hour towards propelling you, to your goals. One of the things that you can do, that you can mainstream in that framework, that you can mainstream, is giving enough time to yourself to think about your goals. That's the first step that you need to take, actually. This is the first step that I would recommend you taking some time for yourself to think about those goals. That's an achievement. After you're done with that and you've identified your goals, you've done it. That's a great job. You've taken a step. Doesn't so you see it doesn't have to be big, because every moment, every step, it counts. It counts. I can tell you about sometimes how a typical day looks like for me. Sometimes um I'll spend 1 hour studying, another hour volunteering, another hour working on my project, the conscientization movement, another hour doing some work for my internship right here at Swan Livelihood. I'm done. 4 hours, I'm done. The rest of of the 20 hours, I'm doing something else. I'm going to spend another fraction of that sleeping. I'm going to spend another fraction of that watching TV. Yeah. So that's going to propel me towards my goals. How is that going to propel me exactly? Well, I've worked on these 5 different areas of my life in those 4 hours. So I'm closer to my goals. So how is the rest of those 20 minutes going to propel me towards my goals? Well, I've given myself enough time to rest, because I need the energy. I need the rejuvenation. I need the strength. And most importantly, I need my sense of self as I'm doing this. The sense of self is very important as you're doing these things. Think about who you are becoming as you're doing all of these things. Think about who you are becoming as you're working on your career. Because your career is not what defines you. Again, it's just another side of you. And the value that you're going to get from that: financial freedom, social capital, all of these are things that are going to come from your career. So when you're doing all of these things, when you're building a personal brand, think about who you are becoming as a person. Now, the second question that you need to ask yourself: what skills, experiences, and qualifications do I need to achieve this vision? Now that you have a picture of this vision, all right, what skills do you need? All right, what skills do you need? My vision is to make an impact in grassroots communities, is to make an impact to empower people, right? So I've been asking myself, what skills do I need to achieve this? Right? I need leadership skills. I need the social skills. I need the networking skills. I need to develop my interpersonal skills. So, what am I going to do about it? Well, one of the things that I can do about it is study, take an online course, take a leadership course, and learn. This is one of the things, one of the ways by which you can develop your skills. I've touched on one. Here's the second way you can develop your skills. You can develop your skill by applying the skills that you have already. You see, you don't need a fancy title. You don't need a position to have a skill. You have skills already. And if you are to look at your life, you're going to see that you've applying these skills for most of the time, and you weren't really conscious about it. Think about what you did this morning. You probably brushed your teeth. After brushing your teeth, you thought about what you're going to do next. That's a skill. You know what skill that is organizational skill. This is where it starts from. Skills start from the things that we do every day. This is where you're going to see them. So if you want to think about, if you're thinking about, so you're probably thinking, so what skills do I have? Don't think so hard because you have them already. Try to observe yourself a bit and look at yourself, look at the way you do things, and you're going to see them. They're going to be so alive in you. Skills. So, apart from the education, one way you can develop your skill is by applying them. So, you can't apply them if you don't know them. So, what I would recommend is observe yourself and you identify your skills. There you go. There you go. So as you're developing that vision, ask yourself, so what skills am I going to need for this? Now, the second part is experiences. What experience am I going to need for this vision? I've talked about one of the visions that I have, or a part of my vision, which is to empower people to impact communities. So I'm always asking myself, so what experiences do I need? What experiences am I going to need? Well, I'm going to need interpersonal experiences because I can't be able to develop a whole community if I can't develop a group of 5 people. So I start with 5 people, a group of 5 people that I take and I say, guys, sit down, let's talk. Let's talk leadership. Let's talk personal development. Let's talk personality development. Right? And as I take those people through that process, right, I guide them in the best way that I can, and I see them grow. I actually see them grow, right? I measure the impact of my work. You see? So that's going to help me refine and learn that, you can literally do the human development in this way. So from that group of 5, I now have the experience to implement a broader vision to a community now. Now I know how to set metrics for that. So you need to think about what experiences you are going to need now. What experiences are you going to need for that vision? Because some background, some experience is very important to it. When you are signing up for something, when you're applying for a program, when you're standing up for something, maybe you want to participate in an election for in an organization. Okay? Do you know the first thing that people are going to ask is, who is this guy? Right? And in order for that, in order for them to know that, in order for us to know that, we are going to ask ourselves your background. Where do you come from? And what have you done in the past? And even in program, if you look at program applications, if you've been proactive in applying for programs, you are going to see that there's likely going to be a section where they're going to ask you about your background experience. If they don't do that, they might ask you to submit your resume. And by resume, we want to know, what have you done? What experiences have you had? Okay? And we're going to come back to this experience part when we're going to talk about behavioral interviewing in the next topic. Okay. Now we come to qualifications. In the next topic, we're going to look at the rhetorical triangle. We're going to look at purposeful communication, qualifications, credibility. How credible are you as a source of this information for the vision that you're providing, the vision that you're presenting? How credible are you as a source? Okay, how credible are you? And you don't necessarily need an education. I was talking to a friend of mine. So, do you see how the trend has been changing? How the trend has been like in the world of work, the job landscape? Things are changing. They're changing every day. And the COVID-19 pandemic has just exacerbated that. It's just I don't know whether to say worsened or improved things in the world of work. I don't know. I can't really. But What I'm saying is the world is changing very quickly. And getting a degree isn't a guarantee, right? That you're going to implement the vision that you make. So you need a plan for that. If you don't have a plan for that, and you're just banking on the qualification that you have, the degree that you have, right? It's not enough. It's not enough. You need a degree for skills, to develop these skills so that you apply them in the real world. What evidence do we have to do this? Well, have you been looking? Look at the development in qualifications that has been happening, right? Now we have new programs that are coming in, new study programs right now, right? We now have bachelor degrees in things like digital marketing. If you had to go 50 years back, did we have such things? I don't know. I wasn't there 50 years ago, but I know for sure that there weren't such qualifications, right? Now we have new programs. We have programs like peace studies and conflict resolution. And peace studies is a academic field that emerged in the 1960s. This is when it emerged. 1960s. When we're looking at the academic landscape, it's not so long ago. We regard it as a new field. Things are changing, right? And peace studies was prompted by the realization that, hey, we actually need peace. Peace is an actual requirement. Communities, economies thrive on peace. This was the realization. They're like, we have people like Johan Gautang in that field. They're like, peace. You see, so things are changing, and they're changing very quickly, right? So in order for you to be relevant, it's not going to be about the degree. It's not just going to be about the degree. Now, the next question that you need to ask yourself is to think about your vision. So, where am I now? Where am I now? In this very moment, where am I now? And where would I like to get to? So, the very first step is to define your vision. Okay? Now, the next step is for you to do a SWOT analysis, right? Do a SWOT analysis. Where am I now? So, what are my strengths? Maybe you are a high school graduate and you have decided to take a gap year before going to university, and that's great. I always encourage people to take gap years if they can, because gap year allows you to think. It allows you to think of how you'd like to develop yourself outside the academic landscape. So, if you've taken a gap year, for example, then one of your strengths is time. It's time. It's a strength, it's an opportunity, time. So, what are your strengths at this moment? Right? So, you need to think about those as you're reviewing where you are currently. What are the strengths that you have? Well, what are the opportunities that you have? Now, what are the threats to those opportunities? Well, what are the weaknesses that you have? So, you need to think about those as you are reviewing yourself and to be honest. Because one of the things that we fail to set clearly defined. We fail to set specific goals. One of the mistakes in goal setting is failing to set specific goals, right? And not being vulnerable, not being honest. And by that, I mean not being truthful. Be honest with yourself. Be honest. Be honest with yourself about the things that you can't do. Be honest with yourself about your weaknesses. What are your weaknesses? What are the things that you can't do? What are the things? So when we're talking about threats, we're talking about the barriers. What are the barriers to the things that you like to achieve, to the vision that you have, to the goals that you have, to your objective? What are the barriers? Think about them. What are the things that could potentially threaten that goal? And you don't necessarily have to solve them all at once. The fact that they are, you have identified them, you can start thinking about them. So how can I manage this risk? Because threats are risks, yeah. So you need to think about, how can I manage this risk? Now, the next step for you is to set that personal development plan if you haven't already. Okay. And then when you set that personal development plan, include your SWOT analysis, include your SMART goals. Set SMART goals. The goals that you set should be specific, first of all. All right. First of all, the first question that you need to ask yourself is, what do I want to achieve in the first place? One. Two. Why? Why do I want to achieve this in the first place? Why is this a goal in the first place? Measurable. Your goals should be measurable. How are you going to know that you have succeeded? So you need to set metrics. You need to set a success criteria. Set a success criteria for your goals. Success criteria for your goals. How are you going to know that you have achieved that goal? Because everything that you work on, be it a project, this is one of the things that we always talk about in project management. A project has an initial phase, the initiation of a project, and then the planning of a project. So start with the initiation phase, and then the planning, and then you implement the project, and then you go on. But then one of the things that interests me is that there is this phase of a project that is called the closure, the closing of a project. You have to reach a point where you close a project. So you have to reach a point where you will know that you have achieved your goal. After you have achieved that, you set another goal to get you to where you want to get to. So how are you going to close it? How are you going to close that program? That objective that you have. What objective do you have, and how are you going to know that you've gotten there? Right? How are you going to know that? So you need to have an objective, right? And the results that you're pursuing. For each objective, what would you like to achieve? Now that you've been thinking about your brand, let's segue into articulating this brand. Articulating this brand. Here's a question. What sources of information do you trust? I'd like for you to write down the sources of information you trust. And it doesn't necessarily have to be academic sources, really. Is it a friend? Who are the people you trust to be credible sources of information? Is it your mentor, your teacher, you know, a religious leader? Write them down. What sources of information do you trust? Well, do you trust yourself as a source of information? Do you trust yourself as a source of information? I do trust myself as a source of information. First of all, information about myself, because I know my interests. I have my best interests at heart. So I trust myself as a source of information about myself. What sources of information do you trust regarding yourself, first of all? Secondly, regarding things that you care about. What sources of information do you trust for news, for example? How are you going to know that that specific source is truthful, is sincere, and authentic? If you hear on the news that people are now being invited to collect grants, right, from a specific area. If you are in India, for example, you hear that people are being invited to collect grants in Mumbai, right? And you're staying in Delhi, okay? And maybe a specific criteria has been put to say this specific category is going to receive these grants in Mumbai. And then you hear your neighbor, and your neighbor is like, hey, I hear the news, yeah? I hear that people are being invited to collect grants, but these grants are for everyone. And people are supposed to collect these grants from Delhi, for example. What are you going to trust as a source of information? Are you going to trust the news, or are you going to trust the neighbor because you love them so much and you talk, you speak, you are friends? Who are you going to trust? Who is going to be an authentic source of information? In my opinion, I'd say the news. Why? Because the news one is established. We know that already they have an upper hand when it comes to information. Well, my neighbor, they probably made that story up, right? So, why are we talking about this? You need to be a credible source of information. You need to be a reputable source of information. You need to be an authentic source of information. You need to be a truthful source of information. I'm so sorry, I kept on doing this. I'm enjoying it. But seriously, though, you need to be on an authentic source of information. Credibility is very important to branding. This is how you're going to build trust and attract people to you, and attract your audience, and engage your audience, and connect with your audience. This is how people are going to listen to you. If you are not an established, a credible source of information, then people are not going to trust you. Your personal brand is going to fail. So if you haven't thought about how you're going to establish this as you build your brand, then your brand has failed right before it has even started. Right? So, are you a credible source of information? Now, I want us to look at purposeful communication. How do you become a credible brand? And for this, we're going to look at communication, because personal brand thrives on communication. This is how you establish a personal brand. Communication. Communication. One of my friends liked to say that word in that way. That's like where like where I'm like repeating it that way because I enjoy it. It's taking me back to that memory right now. Like communication, right? So purposeful communication. So we're going to look at the rhetorical triangle. Have you heard about the rhetorical triangle? Right. By the way, one of the things that I've forgotten to mention is that you need to be researched. You need to be well informed. Be well informed about the things that are happening. Be well informed about current trends. Remember, personal brand, when you're talking about personal development planning, we talked about developing yourself in the different areas of your life and not only your career. So you need to be well versed about the developments that are happening that speak to different areas of your life, right? Be it your social self, for example, right? You need to be well informed about things that are happening out there. For example, in social media, right? You need to be able to acknowledge, to recognize when someone is bullying you, cyberbullying. You need to know that. And you need to know how to be safe on the internet safety, right? These are things that are happening. So you need to be well informed about the things that are happening. And people are being hacked. These are, things that are happening in the social world. So you need to know that, and you need to know the things that are happening. But apart from the scary stuff, the hacking, all of those, you also need to be, well aware about what's happening. What's the new movie series, right? What's the the popular song, the song that's trending right now, and you're most likely going to like it in the genre that you love. I'm talking about personal development, right? Personal development doesn't only appeal to a career. If you want to grow as a person, develop yourself holistically. Don't just think about your career. Because you are becoming, and we talked about this when we are analyzing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talked about self-actualization, right? And one of the things that Maslow concluded was that when one is self-actualizing, they are becoming. It's not a static, it's not a permanent state self-actualization. It's a process that is in continuous development. Realizing your potential is not a destination, it's a journey, you see. So you need to be well updated. What's happening out there, right? Well, if that's one of your interests. So you need to be well read. Now let's look at the rhetorical triangle. So the rhetorical triangle was developed by Aristotle, right? And that successfully happening in three main ways: the speaker or writer can appeal to their audience, right? So let's talk about ethos. Ethos means credibility. Are you a credible source of the value that you are proposing? Why should we listen to you? Are you credible? Okay. Secondly, um, what makes you a credible? This is the question now. It's not just you about being a credible, right, source of that value, but it's about what makes you a credible source of that information. So at this point, as someone who's following, right, this program, right, I'd want you to think about the first question that says, are you a credible source? I want you to think about you questioning yourself whether you're a credible source or the value that you like to propose. That should not be your focus. But you should focus on what can make you a credible source of the value and the information that you would like to provide. If your LinkedIn profile says communications expert, the certifications and licenses or even education section of your profile must show that you are qualified to offer those services. This is one of the ways by which you can attain credibility. You can also use experience. Remember, we talked about it's things not being about degrees and academic qualifications, but it's about the experiences, right? So, are you credible? What things have you done? What impact have you made? What things have you done in the past that make you credible? Where have you made an impact before? And if you haven't made an impact, then start making it so that you become a credible source of information, right? So there must be credibility too and in your delivery. So to do so, um, so if we are to sit down with you, yeah, without uh would getting to know you enable us to see why you are in the field that you are in. This is a very important question. If we're to sit down with you right now, if I'm going to sit down, if I have a virtual conversation with you right now, and um, you know, if I'm to talk, if we are going to have a conversation, would we be able to see why you are in the field that you are in without you having to explain that? Now we're segueing to the personal branding aspect. Would we be able to see that? Why are we talking about this? Why am I asking this question? Why am I posing this? I'm posing this because I'm trying to help you identify how you build credibility. You can't build credibility if you're not engaged in something, if you're not interested in what you are doing. So building credibility starts from an awareness of your identity. If you don't, if you are not conscious about your identity, if you haven't accepted yourself and your weaknesses, then you can't build credibility. You can't. How can you build credibility if you're not even sure about yourself? How can you make other people sure about who you are when you aren't, aware of who you are and sure about who you are? Because when recruiters are hiring people, when recruiters are hiring a person, they genuinely want to know the person that they are hiring. When a recruiter is asking you personal questions like tell me about yourself, they're not trying to intimidate you. I'm telling you from, like, in all honesty, unless if they have unconscious biases, then that's their own problem. But when a recruiter is asking, tell me about yourself, they genuinely want to know who you are, because I want to know the person who I'm going to be working with. I want to know the person who I'm going to celebrate success with. I want to know the person who I'm going to, acknowledge failures with and cry with and say, oh, when it comes to the loss, you know, we cry about it like, no, after we've cried about it, now that, we decide what you're going to do next, we pump ourselves up and like, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do next. We've encountered failure. And it doesn't have to be the managing director or the CEO who says that. Even you can be that person, who stands up in a boardroom and says, no, guys, we are not failures. We are not going to fail. We are not losers. Here's what I suggest. This is what recruiters are looking for. They're looking for a real human who they can resonate with. So if a recruiter is asking you, tell me about yourself, don't feel intimidated. That's the time to shine. That's the time to manifest your identity. That's the time to manifest your unique personality. After leaving an interview, you must feel this resolve, this calm. In some of the interviews that I've, been successful in, I'm saying this, it doesn't mean that I've been successful in all the interviews that I've been, the interviews where I've failed. But in interviews that I've done well, I left the interview room, whether in person or live, online. I left the interview room feeling resolved, feeling calm. Why? Because when I had the opportunity to talk about myself, I let my personality thrive. Now let's go to drumroll, drumroll, drumroll. Let's go to right. While we are still on that, let's post the drumroll. Appropriate diction. Your online brand should tell a story. The way in which you tell that story should resonate with your unique value proposition. So, who are you targeting and who is your audience? And how do you determine credibility in that specific field, in that specific industry? In the world of social entrepreneurship, one of the ways in which credibility is determined is impact, for example, the impact that you've made. Okay. You see, if you look at the trend, especially due to COVID, right? COVID has also created, the COVID-19 pandemic has also created opportunities because people now can now connect virtually more than they, ever have had, more than they have ever done, This is one of the opportunities that has come with COVID-19, right? Um, One of the things, if you look at the posters, especially if you're in the, if you're in the human rights, the social impact field, you would realize that for most speakers, when you look at the speakers, right? I think one of the things that you look at after is you look at the face. Oh, so who is the speaker? After you look at the face and the name, you're going to look at who that person is. That's the credibility. How are they qualified to be a part of this panel discussion? And usually the title tells you that. So people didn't need academic qualifications. For most of the posters that I've seen, I did not see a qualification. I did not see a title, a poster with a title, where the qualification was mentioned, like PhD in social sciences, to be a speaker, to be a panelist. No, not at all. So if you think about credibility, building credibility, don't just think about the qualifications. Think about the impact that you can make to achieve that. Look at some of the people with young people, for example, who have spoken at big platforms, likes of Greta Thunberg, the likes of Eric Njunguna, the likes of Gertrude, right? All of those great, young people who've spoken at big conferences, who've spoken at, COP26, who've spoken at the United Nations, right? They did not need qualifications, academic qualifications, to be there, right? How The question was how credible. What made them a credible source of information? Well, what made them a credible source of information? Look at Greta, for example. The impact that she made, what she has done. You see, all she had to do was just to stand up and say, "Guys, I'm tired. I'm tired of all talk and all no action. I'm tired. I'm tired of climate change. Climate change is happening, and it's happening fast." That's all she had to do. And she built credibility. She built a social identity. Okay? Now, let's move on to logos. Appeal to logic. How is your personal brand structured? Is it organized? What does it say about your organizational skills? Here, I think it is also important for you to consider whether your material is relevant. And we're going to talk about this in depth when we look at the next topics. Now, pathos. Pathos is appeal to emotions. Remember, when we said your profile should tell a story? Well, it should. One tip: find a way to appeal to all your readers or audiences' five senses. I'm going to constantly try to remind you this because when you talk about personal branding, I know there are rules, there are norms, to doing this. There are guidelines, there are whole books, and all of that. But one thing that I would like to remind you is that you are talking to real humans. Yeah, you're talking to real people. Imagine if I was going to come for this course and read so many theories. Oh, in 1985, oh, this professor at the University of Oxford or at Harvard University said, "Oh, personal branding is very important." Blah 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 blah. Using that jargon, all of those technical and um complicated words. What would you get out of this course? What impact would that have on you? You see, it would not work, right? So you need to remember that you're talking to humans, right? You need to know that you are connecting. You need to connect. So this is the connection part, right? When building a personal brand, you need to connect with your audience. Connect with your audience. And if you're using social media, if you're using online profiles, you need to connect with your audience. And if you understand this, then resume writing is going to happen. It's going to be good for you. You're going to enjoy that experience of writing your resume or reviewing it. Why do I say so? Because when a recruiter is going to read your resume, they're going to read it like they're reading a story. But don't. We're going to talk about rules, right? But what I'm trying to get at is they're going to read. They're going to be like, okay, this is John Doe. John Doe graduated from Ignore Open University, right? Or they graduated from Yale University or Harvard University, right? When he graduated, in 2019, he started a course. After taking this course, he also volunteered. Oh, actually, when he was studying at Harvard, while he was studying at Harvard, he was also a volunteer. He was also the head of the Model United Nations, or this specific, club or this program. But I see that John also had has got internship experience. He did this, throughout his career. He did so many, did this internship. Oh, during that internship, he achieved this. He made this specific impact. Oh, I want John Doe. I want him in my company. You see the value. So the value is not going to. It's not just going to be seen in your qualifications, but it's going to be seen in the person that you are, and you're going to say that in your resume, right? Now, I was talking about finding a way. Finding a way. So this that doesn't. Okay, there's a part that does. Okay. All right. Let's say find a way to um connect with your audience. If you are on LinkedIn, um there's an actual space you can actually make posts time and again, right? And people have the opportunity to follow you if they would want to, right? So you need to be adding value, but most importantly, right, you also need to be connecting with your audience. How do you connect with your audience? Either through your online brand or in person, or at an interview. How do you connect with your audience? How do you connect with your recruiter? Well, your recruiter, you tell them a story, right? And appeal to their five senses. Tell a story. Tell a good story. People want to hear a good story, right? When looking at applications, selection committees are not just looking for qualifications and all of that, right? But they also want to hear stories. Stories tell us where you've been. Hmm? Okay? Hmm. Right. So, because your resume is only going to be a page or a page and a half, in some rare cases, right? Use your LinkedIn profile to share an insight into your story. And this was going to be a question. Um, what's the difference between a resume and a LinkedIn profile? Your resume is going to be short, precise, concise, while your LinkedIn profile provides you the opportunity to showcase your skills, showcase your potential, showcase the things that you're good at. So your academic qualifications tell us that you're equipped for this, but your experiences, now this is very important. Your experiences are going to tell us how adaptable and able to apply what you have learned over the years. So your experiences tell a story about who you are, what skills you've developed. So when reporting what you've done, it is important to show it to us, right? So this is a tool that you can use when reporting. We've touched on the rhetorical triangle. Now, I know I related it so much to online branding, but this rhetorical triangle, in order to make this rhetorical triangle work for you, I want you to start applying it in your daily conversations. Apply it at home, at work, at school. When you're going for a presentation at work, you're going to make a pitch. This can be very helpful, right? When you're making an argument, this can be very helpful because we want to know, you need to add credibility to your argument, right? And your argument has to be logical, well arranged, coherent, and your argument has got to have an appeal to emotions because you're talking to people. And this is always going to be what baseline are you going to be using for your argument? Now, we talked about the rhetorical triangle, but now we're going to look at communication in brief to um, segue a bit into purposeful communication, right? So remember, communication is not just about the process of sending and receiving information. This is the definition that we have about communication. But communication is not just the process. It's not just about sending and receiving. It's not about you saying hi and your friend saying hi back, right? Oh, hey, how are you? I'm doing great, right? It's more than that because it is about the meaning that underlies those messages, right? But first of all, let's get into the ins. Let's get to deep into communication, defining communication. So we talked about the underlying meaning. So this meaning can come from the initiator, the one who initiates the communication, or it can be conjured by both the sender and the receiver as they engage in the communication or different worldviews of these communicators. Let's look into the communication process. So, in any case, communication starts with the sender. Right now, I'm the sender. The sender has got to decide what message they would like to send. When the sender thinks and decides what message they would like to transmit, they then encode this message. The first thing that happens is thinking, what would I like to talk about? I'm thinking right now, right? This question, what would I like to talk about? I had to think that I would like to say this because it's helping you understand. You see, so you just don't say unless you are insane or crazy. You just don't say things, right? You have to think first, right? Um, okay, forget that part, the insane or crazy. But you have to think first of all. You have to think about what you'd like to say. Okay, this is called thinking. This is what starts when you initiate during the initiation phase of a communication. You start by thinking, what would I like to say? Now, do you remember in the previous course when we talked about practicing intentionality? We talked about, oh my word, we talked about leading from within. We talked about self leadership. We talked about conditioning your feelings and conditioning your thoughts, right? So this is where it happens now. Now we have moved from that stage. In the previous modules we talked about intentionality, self intentionality, personal intentionality. Now we are up leveling that, right? We are up leveling that. We're moving a bit further. We're moving a step further, and we are now talking about practicing that intentionality at an interpersonal level, right? It's now being practiced at an interpersonal level. This is where you're now practicing intentionality. Intentionality. What would you like to think? So, the first thing that happens is thinking, really. And we touched on ethical leadership, although we didn't, really segue into it, but we touched on aspects of ethical leadership in the previous course, right? And we talked about being something, thinking about the things that relate to your core values as you are doing them, not just doing things, but things that relate to your core values. That was the first thing. The second thing was using moral values as a basis or guideline. This was the second part, but this was core values. What are your core values? So when you're thinking, before you say something, think about your core values. Okay? I know this is hard because communication just happens, but you are going to be communicating, especially in interviews. You're going to be communicating. If you'd like to be a social impact leader, if you like to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be talking to investors. If you like to be a leader, you're going to be talking to the people you lead. You're going to be talking to other leaders as well. And intentionality is very important because there's got to be a goal to everything that you do. And when it comes to leadership, your core values can be one of the metrics or benchmarks that you use. Now, when the sender thinks and decides what they would like to transmit, we said they encode. So, what is encoding in the world of communication? Encoding involves translating translating those thoughts into a message that can be understood by the receiver. Now, remember, a message may be verbal or non-verbal. So, what things go into the message? Well, actual words, like what's happening right now. I've done encoding. I had to think, what would I like to say? And then I encoded. I changed that. I translated that into words so that you can understand. What are the things that go into your message? We talked about symbols, right? Gestures, right? Signs, right? A person creating a craft, crafting an object, crafting an artistic object, crafting a necklace, for example, is communicating because it's a symbol. They're communicating their ideas and all of that, right? Now, so the next step, the message is sent out through a channel. For example, this for video recording is a channel, right? Other channels include emails and all of that. So, after the message goes through the channel, the message gets to the receiver. This is when the encoding process starts. So, encoding is the process of turning or translating the communication, what you have thought. Sorry, when the message gets to the receiver, this is when the process of decoding starts. Decoding is the reverse process. It's the process of turning communication or a message into thoughts. At this point, communication makes an impression on you. For example, you are listening, right? And this message is getting to you. This is when the process of decoding is happening because now you are resonating, you are relating, you are making. Decoding is all about making sense about what's being said, right? But let's look, right. We talk about making sense. So there are now what's important, right, is there are many things, right, that will affect this process. That's going to affect the encoding process. On the other hand, the decoding process, how you're going to translate communication, how you're going to decode communication, is going to be affected by things like personal values, by worldviews, and identity. People are also selective when encoding and decoding this information. They have to think first, right? And there's a term in the field of communication that's called filtering. This is when a person selects what they would like to hear, or what they would like to listen. There's a difference between listening and hearing. Okay? There's a difference. If I clap, you say, oh, I had someone clap. Right. And someone might interpret. I had someone clap, and this is a different interpretation now. As I was listening to someone clapping, there's a difference. You see the difference? The difference when it comes to listening, now you're engaged. There's an element of thinking and trying to understand. So there's something that's called filtering during communication. But we're not going to get deep into that. I'd like for you to understand that when you're talking to someone, I'd like for you to know this. When you are talking to someone, you're talking to a different person. You're talking to a person with their own values. Remember when you talked about identity in the first module, we talked about you having your values, you having core values. Remember this. The other person who you are talking to is their own values, has their own set of values, their own set of core values, the things that are important to them. And these things that might not necessarily be similar to yours. And they don't have to be. So when you are communicating, bear this in mind. If you actually know this other person's core values, if you know their worldviews, then you're actually at a better advantage of communicating best with that person because you can understand them. But you're not always going to get the opportunity to get to know a person's identity or values when you're communicating with them, which is very important for you to be intentional as you're communicating. let's talk about. So there are different levels of consciousness, right? That will go into encoding and decoding a message. So before decoding that message, think about your values, right? The first thing that I'd like for you to think about your values. Second thing that I'd like for you to think about, truth. Does this sound true to you? Are you being honest to yourself and the other person? Are you being your authentic self? What, before you say something, that specific thing that you like to say, right? Does it sound like you when you're saying it, right? You can do all of these other things, but if you want to be happy, don't lie to yourself. This is the greatest mistake that you can make, right? This is a crime against the self. Not being honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself. So before this is a very important part. This is a very important aspect to self-concept. One of the things that we've been trying to help you realize about yourself throughout this course. This is very important about self-concept. It's a critical step. It's a critical thing in self-actualization. Very important. Because if on the other hand you have reflected and you now know all of these things about yourself, but then there might be challenges, of course, with being your true self. But it's also important that whenever you can, just express yourself. Exactly what you're feeling. Like seriously. If you don't like something, just say it. Just say it. Right? If you're not happy about something, just say it. Don't hold back your opinions because it's going to be difficult. It's going to be impossible for you to lead if you don't have that level of honesty. Saying exactly how are you going to defend? How are you going to defend human rights if you're not honest with yourself? Right? How are you going to challenge things that are not good if you can't be honest with yourself? So self-awareness is very important. You see, self-awareness, honesty is very important in leadership. Okay. Now, um, let's go to. So when sending out messages, using whichever communication model, right, that you decide to use, LinkedIn, a resume, or an actual interview, ensure that your message can be universally understood. That your message can be universally understood is clear, straightforward, and coherent. So you need to think about your audience. What kind of audience are you going to be talking to? Because you can't talk to different audiences in the same way. Now, this is a skill. This is the strategy in leadership now. Understanding the audience that you're talking to. Understanding your audience. So define your audience in personal branding. Who is my audience? Who am I communicating with? Who am I connecting with? Defining your audience is very important. Okay? Let's briefly talk about the concept of noise in communication because this is very something that's very important. This is something that's going to happen likely going to happen in an interview, even on your online profile. If someone tags you on LinkedIn and they post a photo um, detailing an experience that you had during the last weekend, right? Someone posts that and they tag you on LinkedIn, right? You're probably having fun. You're probably dancing. You probably had maybe I want to imagine what happened, what might have probably happened, but you're in your wild version and you're just having fun. And someone decides to tag you on LinkedIn, that's not going to help. It's not going to help you because recruiters are going to see that. It's going to make a bad impression. It's going to make a bad impression. So I wanted to talk about the concept of noise. It's very important that you understand what are the things that hinder a message from being received. I can say one thing, but trying to express something else. The real message doesn't lie in what I'm saying right now. It lies in what I'm trying to express. You understand that? It lies in what I'm trying to express. This is where the real message lies. So you need to understand that. Okay? Let's talk about noise. Noise refers to anything that interferes with a message or its transmission. Noise, um, it exists in many forms and different forms, including physiological noise. Physiological noise is a physical state or a condition that interferes with a message. For example, if you're feeling hungry right now or tired as you're listening to this, that's noise because it's hindering. It's becoming a barrier to me connecting with you right now as you're listening to this, as you're probably listening to this recording more. Yeah, that's noise. Why are we talking about this? You probably don't want to go to your interview while feeling hungry. You need to eat. This is very important. You need to eat before an interview. I'm serious. Do you know people overlook these things, but these things are very important. Because if you go to an interview on an empty stomach, then that means that there's something that's going to be disturbing you throughout the interview, and you're not going to be able to fully engage in that interview if you're feeling hungry. Okay? Let's go to psychological noise. Psychological noise refers to mental or emotional states that impede message transmission. If you're following this session, or um you're probably watching this recording, and you've told yourself that you'd like to benefit from this program, you'd like to benefit from this course, and you'd really like to learn. But then you're thinking about your girlfriend, and you're thinking about why she hasn't texted you yet. Then that's psychological noise because you aren't going to be able to process what I'm saying right now exactly because you're thinking about it. And that's okay. I'm not saying that you don't have to think about it, but when doing something, you set your mind to one thing and focus on exactly that. So when you're in an interview, or you are communicating with an audience, or you are branding, you have an audience, maybe online, you're using LinkedIn or something else. Focus on one thing. Focus on that. Because if you focus on something else, then you're going to your attention now is going to be diverted, and you're not going to be able to fully communicate your ideas. You're not going to be able to fully express yourself, because communication doesn't lie in words just coming out or words being written. It comes from within, comes from the message that you'd like to express, and your personality comes in. So you need to be self-aware, right? Physical. Let's talk about physical noise. Physical noise refers to the actual sound, the actual sound in a physical setting that disrupts the transmission or reception of a message. Maybe you're speaking, or you're speaking, and there's always decides to play their favorite track, or you're at a conference, then someone else decides to make noise while you're speaking. Someone else just stands up. They're on a phone call and they're busy shouting, right? Then there's physical noise. Or maybe you're in an interview, right? And your phone is ringing remember to put your phone on silent or to leave it behind if you can when going to an interview. I know people overlook these things, but these things will have an impact on you during the message, right? If you can leave it behind, because it's going to be a distraction. Imagine someone calling you. Well, you've decided to put your phone on silent, then it's now vibrating in an interview. What are you going to do? Are you going to stand up and answer it? Are you going to you know, try to switch it off in your pocket, and you're like, you're sitting like this, and then you're like, you don't want the selection committee to see that you're doing something, but then you're doing it, and then you're like, you see, and then you're trying to switch it off, and then you're like, so in 2018, in 2018, I it's not going to work. What I'm trying to get at, I'm trying for you, I want you to understand that noise exists in many forms during a communication encounter. But one of the things that I'd like for you to benefit from what I'm saying right now is that you need to be focused and engaged in whatever you're doing. Right? You need to be engaged. You need to be fully engaged in what you're doing. And this is what I always do when speaking to people, maybe in person or online. I usually ask people to turn on their cameras if they can. And as I'm speaking, I'm looking at their faces. And even in person, as I'm speaking to people, I'm looking to their faces. I'm looking at their reactions. And depending on the nature of my presentation, if I'm trying to get their buy-in, right? If I'm trying to get their buy-in as I'm doing that presentation, as I'm making that presentation, I need to watch their their reactions and responses to see whether what I'm trying to say, the message that I'm sending, is doing its job. If they're responding in a negative manner, then it means that my message is not. I have to adjust. And this is a tool that you can use even in an interview. Even though I know interviewers, recruiters are trained that during an interview they're not supposed to express emotion, right? They're supposed to be serious. This depends, on the organizational culture. But again, your interviewer is likely not going to show emotion because they've been trained that way. Because if they show emotion, then it's going to disrupt the process. Okay. What I'm trying to get at is, even though they can't fully show their emotion, you can engage. You can look into their eyes. You can engage. You can see the way they're writing and the pace, right? Whether the communication that you're making is doing its job. You can see it. I'm telling you. I'm not going to use an example where things went well. I'm going to use an example where things didn't go well. In an interview that I attended online some 2 years back for some program, soon after the interview, I could tell that I had not been accepted into the program. I could tell. You see? And this is largely because as I was speaking, I was not listening. Of course, you can't fully do both things. But as you're speaking, really, you need to be paying attention. You need to be paying attention now. You need to pay attention to what's going on. And this has happened before, and this has actually worked for me. Pay attention as you're speaking. Okay? In that interview, I was not paying attention because if I was paying attention, then I would probably have realized that I was going off course. I was going off topic. Right? This takes us into our next topic, modules of communication. But before we go to the modules of communication, I'd like to talk about the last type of noise, which is cultural noise. Cultural noise can be defined as a hindrance in communication processes that results from differences in how people see the world. And cultural noise can even come in terms of the generational dynamics. The way I would address an audience of young people aged 18 to 26 is not the way that I would address um, an audience of older people, for example, because they have different values and all of those things. So I need to define. We talked about when we initially talked about online branding, we talked about the importance. So here is the importance of defining your audience. You're going to know how to speak to these people, right? Let's go to the modes of communication. There are three main modes of communication. We have the linear mode of communication, we have the interactive mode of communication, and the transactional mode of communication. According to this model, communication is a one-way process, right? Linear, in which a sender transmits a message to the receiver. So, what is the backdrop of the linear mode of communication? Well, the model is ignorant on the part of feedback. Doesn't take the medium, context, or noise into consideration, right? Only one message is transmitted at a time. So there's no way to know whether a message was understood or received by its receivers because there's no room for feedback. Think about the radio in some instances. When the reporter is reading the news, we assume that people are listening, right? But we won't really know how many people are listening and what those people are thinking, what their opinions are, is they are listening. You see, this is the linear mode of communication. Now, these modes of communication are not going to appear like, oh, the linear mode of communication. Hey guys, I'm now using the linear mode of communication. These things occur naturally. But you, by knowing them, you have the unique opportunity to leverage on that information and use it. Be more intentional in your communications to avoid communication modules that don't work. Let's go to the interactive mode of communication. Now, the interactive mode of communication, here participants at alternate roles as sender and receiver. So, what's the difference? Well, you speak and passively wait for the other responder to respond because messages don't exist in one form. But listen, examples of typical instances where this has happened. Think about one of the classes that you had, right? If you had a class with a boring professor or a great one, I might add, right? It's likely that the interactive mode of communication was happening there because the professor was just sitting there and they're speaking and then you're listening, or maybe an event that you attended. It's likely that the speaker was speaking for a long period and you're just listening. This is the interactive mode of communication. But when speaking at events, when speaking to people, really, I don't like to speak um, without gauging how the message is being received and without connecting to my audience because I'm talking to real people. This is what I would like to believe in. I'd like to engage people and have a real conversation. This is how you make an impact and engage with people. Let's talk about the transactional. This is what I love now. The transactional mode of communication, right? So the honest truth is that even though you were waiting, coming back to the interactive, you either consciously or unconsciously sending messages to the sender. Here, senders and receivers are referred to as communicators because communicators are simultaneously sending and receiving messages. According to this model, you communicate for common understanding as you generate new meaning, build relationships, and develop self concept. Woo! This was a lot. Let's go back a bit. According to this model, you communicate one for common understanding. Remember, when you talk about the definition of communication, not being about sending and receiving information, but generating new meaning. According to this model, you communicate to generate new meaning. You communicate to build relationships. This applies to networking now. You communicate to develop self concept because self concept doesn't always it also develops. It also comes from interpersonal interactions. This is why we're talking about relationships in the first module. Okay, right. Let's say going to the next topic, getting started. Now we've talked about branding essentials. Let's talk about getting started. What is personal branding? Think about it. When people say your name, right? What do you think comes to their minds or mind? Well, the good part is you can actually curate this. You can actually program this. And it sounds really, but in all honesty, you get to decide the online brand that you like to build. This is what I'm trying to get at. Okay? You can decide that. So let's define personal branding. Personal branding is how we market ourselves to others and how others perceive us. It's a two-way. So there are two aspects to it. The first part, how we market ourselves to others, and secondly, how others perceive us. How are others seeing how we are, marketing ourselves. Remember, personal branding doesn't mean that you need to have a single identity or one thing that you're known for, right? Doesn't mean that you have to be known for many things either. So ask yourself these questions. What is my purpose? What do I stand for? What values would I like to bring to life? What is my mission? What is my vision? Define your audience. Who do I want to impact with my work? It's very important. So think about each of these questions, right? And then write them down. Write your responses down. Okay? Right. Um, So the next step is to make a commitment. We talked about making a commitment. Now, here's the commitment that you need to make in your personal branding journey. Craft a personal purpose statement. Okay? Craft a personal purpose statement. A personal purpose statement captures your milestones. Okay? Um, Captures your mission and purpose in life. Remember, it should reflect your core values and milestone goals. So you need to be assertive and affirmative. Here, think about your goals and milestones. After you have a personal purpose statement, your personal purpose statement is for you, right? For you to think about and for you to use as a go to guide when you're unsure about decisions. Because let's go to choosing a career path or choosing a degree that you'd like to pursue. The first thing that you like to think about is, what do I want to get? What would I like to achieve with what I'm doing? So, what you think about when choosing a career. What would I like to achieve? What skills am I going to get out of this? So, your personal purpose statement is something that you're going to be referring to as you go along the journey. Now, the next thing that you need to think about in your online branding journey is a personal brand statement, right? So, your personal brand statement is about what you do, why you do what you do, right? Your unique selling point and value proposition. So here's an example formula that I like. Here's an example. Yeah, I'm a dynamic social engineer dedicated to empowering other people, other youth through mentorship. So what was the formula? The formula that I used here. Okay. So your personal brand statement, first of all, needs to have an identity. This is why we're talking about identities in the first place. Your personal brand needs to have an identity. Personal brand statement. Who are you? This is the question. Who is this person? So you need to have an identity first. An active social engineer dedicated to empowering other youths. The second thing that you need to have is a purpose, mission, or vision. Lastly, how are you going to achieve? How are you achieving this mission? This is the last part, through mentorship, right? So these things have to be there when you think about when you're writing a personal brand statement. Here's another formula that I can also encourage you. Formula, other formula is your mission, purpose, or vision plus skill or strength plus adjective, right? Let's go to online branding 101. According to a survey, 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates during the hiring process, right? So what does your online home say about you? Visit your Instagram. So visit your Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter profiles. What do they say about you? Consistency is essential. Remember, your profile should be coherent and consistent. Okay. So I want you to remember this. Remember when you talked about we talked about the rhetorical triangle. We talked about we talked about ethos, logos, and pathos. One of the ways in which you can use credibility, let's say when you're writing something, you're writing a cover letter, for example, or you're just writing something, or you are doing a project proposal, you're saying something, right? You're making a presentation. One of the ways you can use to make credibility to your claims is by using established research, statistics. How are we going to weigh? How are we measuring the truthfulness of what you're saying? Well, here's an established claim. So this is one of the things that you can use in doing your pitch. Right, we're going to look at this more during the in workshop, but let's look at resume writing, right? So let's talk about some of the best practices in resume writing. Your resume should be concise, clear, straightforward, and readable. It should be easy to skim, right? So use consistent formatting and list headings in order of experience, in order of importance. And again, pay attention to white space balance. Include contact information. Remember, when we talked about the rhetorical triangle, right? Qualify your claims and quantify your impact. What did you do? Right? What problems did you solve? As I'm looking at this, I'd like to know if I'm going to hire you in my company, if I'm going to hire you in my um, association, where have you made an impact before? I'm going to be looking at this. So um, it's very important for you to see really how from the insights that you can get from the rhetorical triangle, really, how can you appeal to your audience, to the person who's going to be reviewing your resume, right? So the impact, don't just say, oh, I was at company A, right? And during my time at company A, I made a huge impact. I increased sales. I was a great salesperson at company B. No, 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 no. No. Quantify and qualify. For example, you can say, I increased revenue by 5%. But don't just end there. Remember the rhetorical triangle? Go on to say, I increased sales by 5%, right? By introducing new technology. But again, be specific. What new technology did you introduce? How did you improve your process, right? Right, let's talk about what not to do. Don't include your date of birth. Now I'm just being straightforward. Don't include, I would advise you not to include your date of birth on your resume, right? I would also advise you not to use a narrative style and third person narrative voice. Using narrative like I, oh, I worked for Google. I was in internet Google. I was in internet this company, right? No. It should be concise. Say led a group of youth, led, capture what you did exactly. Because your resume is likely going to be read by people who don't have time really to read long and boring stories. They just want to hear what you did. This is the focus of an interview. It's going to of an resume. It's going to get you to the interview where you're going to get to speak about these experiences that you've had. You see, right? Again, in your interview, don't include a picture, right? Or your gender, right? Don't include it. It's not really a best practice. Again, this is something that I'm recommending you not to include. If you got a job and your resume had a gender, great for you, right? You got that job. But I'm just saying, this is a recommendation. Don't, if you can, don't include your gender. Again, don't list references, right? And then the last thing for you to not do, right, is to not proofread your resume. And have a lot of grammatical mistakes and typos. Just so that you don't invest time. And already I'm seeing your personality. I'm seeing that you're not job ready. You're not ready to go to work. You're applying for a job, but you're not ready. Applying for a job doesn't mean that you're ready. Character. This is how we're going to see readiness now, yeah? Your preparedness. Are you mentally prepared for this job? I want to know this before I hire you because I don't want someone who's going to become a burden. I don't want to have to focus so much energy on you rather than what we are working on. So readiness is very important. Readiness is seen in preparedness. And if you did not invest enough time in your resume, in proofreading that resume, then it's a no for me. It's a no. Because you're not ready. And your resume is going to um set you up for an interview, right? So again, be concise. Use action verbs. What did you do exactly? Did you train? Did you compile? Did you arrange? Did you coordinate? Did you deliver? Did you streamline? Did you catalog? Did you audit? Did you assist? Or did you process something? What was the depth and the breadth of your involvement? What's important here is not the position that you had, but it's about how effective you were, right? Let's go back to your values, right? Have you been think about some of your values? In what instances did you act on them? Let's do a mini reflection session. What are some of your skills? In what instances have you applied your skills? What is a skill in the first place? Well, a skill is easily can easily be understood as being able to do something, right? So, where have you applied these skills? What problems did you solve? What impact have you had? Right? What impact did you have? What have you learned? Right? When talking about your experience, right? Work experience, emphasize on the impact. Now, when talking about accomplishments in your resume or maybe on LinkedIn, right? I'd advise this Laszlo Bock formula. Laszlo is a former Google boss. Is also the author of Work Rules, right? Use this formula. I'd advise accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z, right? Or yeah. So accomplished X, use an action verb. Why, right? Quantify it. Measure what you accomplished. Provide a baseline, right? What is the baseline? What are you comparing what you accomplished against? If sales were at 10% before you got to into that job, then that is your baseline. And you improved them by 30% from that percentage. Then that's your accomplishment. Say it, mention it. Then Z or Z, what did you do exactly? What did you do exactly? And Z, very important. we're not just interested. Just interested in your skills. Sorry, we are not just interested in what you did, but we are interested in your skills because your skills are going to tell us what value you are going to bring to our association, organization, or institution. Okay. Now, for example, you can say accelerated employee performance and productivity by 18%. You've measured it. How did you do it exactly? Maybe you introduce a new strategy. Mention that strategy. Mention how you created a new process or improved one. Talk about what you did, show why you did it, and demonstrate what impact you had. Let's go to the honors and awards section, right? So here we're looking at what sets you apart, what differentiates you, it makes you stand out as an application, right? Can include presentations, publications, awards, and things like that, right? And same applies to cover letter writing, really, right? Your structure in a cover letter, it should be straightforward, it should be clear, and show why you're the best candidate for that job, and should land you into an interview. So remember the rhetorical triangle. This would be a great place to apply it. Credibility, remember these three: credibility, logic, and emotion. Remember that you're talking to a real human here. Your communication, your written, either written or verbal, should be deliberate and thoughtful. This applies to email. Unfortunately, because of time, we are not going to be able to cover email etiquette. But again, your written communication, maybe in an email or anything like that, or another communication, should be thoughtful because you're talking to real people here. Okay. And let's talk about LinkedIn. LinkedIn, right? So your LinkedIn will include what I'd like to say about the headshot is um don't put a selfie, right? Because with LinkedIn, you are now putting your story in a professional context. So don't put a selfie, put a professional image, and then your headshot, right? Sorry, the headline. What's going to come? The image that's going to come here, the background image now, it should it should speak to your profile. How does it relate? If you're someone, for example, if you're social activist, for example, right, then maybe one of the things that you might see, for example, I know this is common and it's becoming a buzz thing, but one of the things that we can see is an image showing the sustainable development goals. Then he has to say, oh yeah, we understand, because all of these things, the role of these things really is just to give us a picture of who you are, right? Then finally, when talking about projects, what was the project? Why did you do it? How and what impact did you have? After developing your profile, you'd like to focus on living up to the premises of that profile. Think about what you can do to promote your work. What is it about you that few people can copy? Most importantly, in what way can you express your own uniqueness? This is it. Don't overthink it. Really, don't overthink it so much. Like, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I should be LinkedIn profile. Gosh. While we have established rules and norms for these things, for resume writing, for LinkedIn profile, really, it's all about expressing your own uniqueness. Right. Now we've come to the last main last main topic for this module, soft skills workshop. Remember, today's landscape is changing every day and quickly. So you need skills that are going to prepare you for that. But you also need an adaptive mindset. You need to be a continuous learner. So don't be too complacent and think that you've made it. No, keep working, keep growing. And remember, to grow professionally and socially, you don't need to have a big title. Just show up, apply what you've learned, and think, and develop your skills in this process. Never stop learning. Let this be your motto. Never stop learning. If you make a process of it, then yeah. Skills are about building on your values and identity. So capacitate yourself with information and read widely, right? Hmm. Great. Thumbs up if you've stayed this long. Right. Lifelong skills development. So we talked about needing the skills, the knowledge, information, and abilities, right? But the way you can develop your core skills is through application and self-reflection. You need to have the skills. So let's say go into employability, right? You need to have the skills, knowledge, and competencies to work. These you will also need to secure a job, retain a job, and find a new job, right? Let's talk about core skills. These are my some essential core skills. What are core skills in the first place? Well, core skills are competencies that are essential to learning and working in an ever-changing environment. Bunched together, they are an integral ability to deal with change, adapt, and think critically. Here's some essential core skills: the ability to learn and think critically, communication, problem solving, interpersonal or people skills, digital literacy, numeracy. And throughout this course, these are some of the skills that we've been emphasizing on and helping you develop. Let's go to networking essentials. What is networking? Networking is about connecting with people, connecting with others to share knowledge, exchange information, and collaborate. So when you connect with more people, you get more opportunities. Okay? It's about building relationships, being proactive, right? Reach out to speakers after events, deepen existing relationships as well. Don't reach out to people when you need something. No. Think about who might be a potential mentor, in a specific area. Mentor and mentee relationships are not linear transactions. You also need to think about what value you can add to your mentor. Yeah. Here's a networking tip: get familiar with writing cold emails. Right. Writing cold emails is a skill. It requires self awareness, a sense of purpose, and confidence. Otherwise, you won't be able to write a cold email that succeeds at its goals. So be clear on your intention. What are you hoping to achieve with that cold email? Is it to connect with that individual? Is it to request for an informational interview? Right. So talk to people who are where you want to get to. Acknowledge what the connection is doing and how that aligns with your interests. Right. So it should fit your strategic plan or your overall vision. So as you are building that brand identity, you are going to need a support group, and your network is going to be that support group. Right. Now let's go into behavioral interviewing. Behavioral interviewing is an approach to interviewing that focuses on your previous experiences, using those assets, using those to assess your suitability for the job you're applying for. You will need to show how you've demonstrated certain competencies, skills, and knowledge. This is where you will weave in some reflection, demonstrating lessons learned, skills developed, and how all of that combined makes you a fit for this role. Okay? So, what are some of the tips? Be memorable, right? I should be thinking about you even after interviewing you, yeah? So, be memorable. What are we going to remember about you? Well, what are you going to remember about me after this course, right? After the interview, yeah? So be authentic. The key to being memorable, how to be memorable, just be yourself. If you're someone who's humorous, if you're someone who's cocky, artsy, and bubbly, that should be expressed, but in a professional context, right? So one of the aspects, key critical aspects, is being listening. Be pay attention, listen actively, listen for understanding, be vulnerable, be grounded, make eye contact, share more about your growth plans. What journey are you on? How might this role strategically help you to get there? Be yourself. Because organizations, institutions, companies are looking for real people. People who can understand and people can be flexible, people they can talk to. So don't lose that human touch, right? So, yes, one of the most mind-boggling questions that comes in interview: Why you? Why should we hire you? What is your unique value proposition? What is your unique selling point? Well, the key to this, to answering this question, really, be innovative and engaged. Right? Try to propose a solution to a problem which that company or institution is facing. Remember, keywords exist for a reason. Learn the important ones and include them in your interview. You have to understand the culture of that organization that you're going to work in. You need to understand the structure. Because when interviewing, really, we recruiters are looking for people who can resonate with their values. So you need to be well researched on the goals. Goal alignment is key. It's very important because it helps a recruiter understand or determine how fit you are. You're fit, right? How fit you are for a specific role. If I feel that you don't align with our goals, then I'm not going to hire you. Because each company has got its each institution has got its strategic goal, strategic value, strategic vision, strategic mission. If your coming in is not going to help us in any way to get there, then it's not going to work. This is something that you can also apply at personal level. If someone wants to be in your network, or if someone wants to be your friend, and they're not going to they're not going to help you attain your goals, they're not going to be a strategic person, be of any value in your goal attainment, then there's no need for them to be there, because if they're not pushing you forward, then they're probably drawing you back, because that attention could be used for something else. So look at it this way, right? So let's I hope you've been enjoying the course so far, and you've been enjoying the learning, and you've been having fun. Now we head to the final reflections on the personality development and leadership course. Yay! Right. Finally, reflect on your story. You are living that story every day, every moment. Remember to be yourself. You don't need a concrete definition of yourself. Yeah? You are the little moments where you feel safe, where you still feel peaceful. You are many things that your mind can come up with. I want you to remember this. There isn't an authentic self that doesn't change. If you like something, or if you like doing something in a certain way, and you no longer like it, then that's okay. No one should judge you for that, because interests change. The only one of the ways in which you're going to grow is through change. So allow that to happen. Okay? Right. So develop an interdisciplinary and transferable skill set, because this is what organizations and institutions are looking for. Again, finally, attune to the little voice, self reflect, and define why your voice is important. Believe in your voice and believe that your voice is of value. Honor your commitments, right? Learn experientially and grow. Finally, be a happy person and be yourself. I thank you so much for following through this course and being a part of this journey. I hope that you've learned a lot, and that you've gained a lot, and that you've had an experience throughout this program, throughout this course. And I send my best regards, and thank you so much. Thank you for being there. Thank you for following. Thank you for watching. And I hope that you get to realize your own potential as you continue to grow. Be yourself, be happy, and and listen to your inner voice, listen to yourself. Thank you and best regards.